My name is Noémie Goudal. I'm a visual artist, and you're here in my show called The Story of Fixity. So when you enter the space, you will see 3 screens, and then the work is, it's almost like one very long panoramic film that has been cut into 3 different screens. And when you walk into the space, you walk in between the 3 screens. The screens are made of different cutouts, so there are actually screens that are a little bit 3-dimensional, and they're actually the replica of what has been used to create the films. And you will also have drops of colors and of water falling from the ceiling. When we saw this building, you can see traces of infiltrations on the walls. There are a few leaks. So there is already something that within the building you could feel the damp, or like the space is sweating. It's very near the flames, and in one of the gutters you can hear some drops falling, and we have emphasized that in the space. So it was already a very sort of fertile ground for us to work on. So it's really about, not just about the work itself, but it's about response to the space, and how as a viewer, when you arrive, you are invited through a journey. In the last years, I've been looking at what we call Paleoclimatology, which is really about the scientists who look at the world as not a fixed entity, but as something that is completely in movement all the time. The scientists are really talking about the world as if it was a sort of patchwork and a layering of various places that came together and then get separated again and got together again, etc. A landscape is essentially like a sort of sandwich of loads of different periods of times. So I think that's also part of how I build my landscapes. I want them to be coming from different places, and I want them to be already a weaving of different space and time. So in this project, I've explored a new area, which is the cycles of water. We know it's on the planet for 4.5 billion years when the planet was created. The water has been shaping our environment completely. The water has designed the relief of the planet. A river can start at a source at the top of a mountain. The river falls from the source, and then it touches the rocks, and it brings all the minerals from the rock down into the valley, and then it feeds the forest with those minerals, and then the leaves will fall in the river. Some mushrooms will be created, and then the water will bring those mushrooms to the mussels and the oysters at the bottom of the river. And what I found fascinating is this very clever cycle, that one place nurtures another territory, that nurtures another territory. And the water is amazing for that, because it doesn't have borders. It flows from below the earth to above the ground, to rivers, to oceans, to sea, to the sky, and then back down into aquifers that stays for millions of years. So I think there is nothing that can talk about this cycle and this movement better than water. During the film, there is a moment where it goes from a landscape during the day lit by the sun to a sort of completely desynchronized version of itself. So we go from night to day, and then we've got the same process going from day to colors, and then from colors to night. When the color slightly arrives within the landscape, I wanted to create a form of desynchronization and disruption, the absolute disruption of this landscape. The colors were sort of embodiment of those minerals and those elements. And it's almost like the landscape has been shifted to a version of itself that is almost what is at the core of it, or what is inside of it that you can't see. So when I first started to work in the studio, I was working with the inks that were from my printer. I wanted to see how I can use the core of my landscapes, which are actually those inks, and how I can make them leak, get liquefied, and make them disintegrate from its core. And I have been working with lots of different people who help me in the chemistry of those inks to make them leak. I love finding optical tricks in every single step of the process. I think it's something that is extremely important to me, is that you can see that it's completely made by hand. There are little accidents here and there that we left. And to me, it's important to really see the materiality. And I'm hoping that those tiny errors will help to question what you are really looking at. In order to construct my backdrops and my landscape, I take photographs of real landscape that I then cut and then put together to reshape an imaginary landscape. A landscape is not about particularly where it is, but it's more about what it evokes to you or to you or to you. I think everybody have their own way of responding to a landscape. And I want to give enough gaps as well within the work for people to really, implicate themselves. The story of fixity refers to how we have fixed a way to look at the landscape as being a fixed entity for years. So I'm wondering how that could be potentially change or potentially be seen differently. When I was young, I had a globe with the oceans, the frontier, the names of the countries, and everything was so defined and everything was set and offered to me like it was a fixed system. And then when I started to read as a non-scientific person about paleoclimatology and all those questions about how the world is actually in a constant fluidity and in a constant movement, then I thought, okay, so how did we separate ourselves completely from this vision? And is it still possible for me to look at it, not through our time, which is extremely fast, but to the time of the planet, the deep time, the geological time, that is much longer. And if I do this exercise, then I would be able to look at the world with a very, very different angle, and suddenly it becomes alive. In the space, we also have leaks and those drops that are falling from the ceilings, and that are very much an extension, a link between the films and the space, and this kind of desperate wish to extend and to fight with the flatness of an image. There are many possible readings to the work, but I think it's important for me that everybody have their own way to access the work. And if people can have a moment for themselves to question their relationship to the land or to water, I think that's already a good start, I think. I think maybe the work can bring a door, to not understanding, because it's not about understanding, it's more about re-questioning, our relationship with the world around us. As humans, we obviously live on a scale of time where you don't see a mountain change, or you don't see the shape of an ocean change. One scientist said that a mountain is like a wave, because it is a wave, but through a time scale that is much, much different. Suddenly, when you look at it that way, you see it as a living and moving entity, very much alive. And I hope that you can feel that in the show as well, that it's alive on every corner.